Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Gain Efficiencies with Electronic Document Storage and Digital Taxing webinar. We are delighted to have you with us today, and we hope you will enjoy the benefit from this presentation and discussion. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers, Mr. Russell Ingleton and Mr. Scott Belfer. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Frederick. Good evening, everyone. And as Frederick just said, again, thank you very much for participating in this evening's webinar. My name is Russell Ingleton, and a little bit of a background. I'm one of the senior product managers at TELUS Health. Personally, I've been doing this for about 30-some-odd years, starting from being the lowly hardware technician on the roadshow to programming to supporting, and now ultimately to product manager. Tonight, as my co-host or co-presenter as well, I have Mr. Scott Belfer with us. Scott, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Russell. As you noted, my name is Scott Belfer. I, too, am a senior product manager for the Kroll line of products with TELUS Health. I have been with the company for approximately 6 years, but I've been doing systems management in one way, shape, or form for about 20. I am still a practicing pharmacist part-time in the province of Ontario, and I use that experience to help in my current role at TELUS.
Thank you, Scott. So, having said all that, and again, we apologize for our cameras. They may be flickering on and off throughout this evening. I'll begin here. First off, our agenda for tonight, I've already covered off the first one, is our introductions and everything. Primarily, tonight, we're going to be talking about electronic document storage. I'm going to have Scott talk about that. I'm going to take over and talk about the FaxRx Cloud process, because that's, again, all part of electronic document storage. And then Scott will finish off talking about our Offsite RX or backup product that we also offer. So, anyway, Scott, if you want to start the presentation here, I'll hand this over to you, and you can start beginning about telling us about the electronic document storage features.
Sure. Thank you, Russell. Electronic document storage is now a term that we've used or started using in place of the term paperless pharmacy, because I think everyone on the call realizes that you can't go completely 100% paperless in a pharmacy world, because we do have pieces of paper that we must, by law, have to provide to the patient. So we're going to be talking about electronic document storage. So why are we actually talking about electronic document storage? Over the past few years, a number of the jurisdictions that we practice in have implemented exercises or underwent exercise to define what constitutes a patient record. As an example, in the PEI policy, we have the definition that a record is a complete reference of all documentation related to the care of a patient. This may include, but is not limited to, records related to prescriptions, medication reviews, patient counseling, drug administration, opioid dosing logs, etc. And at the same time, many of these jurisdictions also took a look at the document retention rules that they currently have and made some decisions to bring them more in line with other healthcare professionals like our physician colleagues. So in some jurisdictions, it went from maintaining records for 2 years to maintaining records for a period of 10 years past the last date of service. Now, to put that into context, let's kind of walk through a little bit of a story. So an infant receives their first prescription at your pharmacy when they're just 6 months old. That infant continues to receive prescriptions from your pharmacy as well as other services as they grow up. They continue to use the services of your pharmacy well into their adulthood. They receive their last prescription from your pharmacy on their 90th birthday and then sadly pass away a week later. So the question that we're going to pose is, how long is the pharmacy required to store this patient's complete record? And if you say 100 years, you're correct, because it's 10 years past the last date of service. In those jurisdictions that have adopted not quite as comprehensive, some of them have gone 2 years past the last date of service. So in that particular jurisdiction, you're still storing all that documentation for this particular individual for 92 years. So a lot of the jurisdictions realized that to maintain that amount of paper was just physically impossible. So they adopted electronic document retention rules. On this slide, you see 9 flags that represent the 9 provinces in Canada that have officially indicated that they do support electronic document storage. Now, what may be slightly different in each province is the length of time that you need to maintain these documents, as well as whether or not, once those documents are stored electronically, if they can be shredded. So the Kroll's advice to each and every one of you is when you're deciding to go down this path, you check with your colleges to ensure that you completely understand what can and cannot be done and how long you have to maintain these electronic records for. So talk about electronic documents, it's pretty straightforward. It's the documentation that we generate and that we want to maintain within our patient records. Now, the one little piece that is always under question or has been under question is what do I do with the original written prescription? So the Food and Drug Act regulations section, as noted on the slide, requires that written prescriptions or written records of verbal prescriptions be retained for at least 2 years after the day they were filled. Now, in July of 2014, Health Canada advised that their interpretation of the term written does include both the original written prescription or an electronically scanned copy of the original prescription. So Health Canada then also put out and further clarified their position in stating that if an original prescription is scanned into a secure electronic database, the legal requirement to store a written prescription is considered met, and there's no need to retain the original handwritten printed prescription. So in other words, once you scan it into a secure database in a system such as Kroll, you no longer have to file the original, you can actually shred it. Once again, provinces do have to support this, so our advice once again is just double check with your jurisdictional bodies or your colleges to make sure that this can be done. So how does this work in Kroll? Okay. When it comes to electronic document storage, we have 2 models. We have what we used to call print and scan. You print what you need, including your hard copy and your medication picked up labels if you have them activated. You put pen to paper to document and sign what you need. Then scan your labels and documents into the system using 2D barcode technology. And once it's successfully scanned in, you can shred that document. The second approach, which is actually going to be the topic of a further webinar in the next couple of months, is you print your file and your receipts, but you do not print a hard copy or any medication picked up labels. Those are the electronic records that are stored in your system. And using an electronic signature pad, you can actually sign, and I'm using air quotes if you can't see me, your prescription using the electronic signature pad. So your signature is then applied to the record electronically. So there's no scanning back in, there's no printing, and there's no paper to shred. So the focus of today's webinar is the first part, is our print and scan approach. So what do I need if I want to go down this path? You need a half-decent document scanner, and you need some configuration set up in your store config options, and that's it. So once we go through this, if you decide to go on this path, you can actually turn this on tomorrow as long as you have access to your store configuration setup. So under File, Config, Store, Labels, Option 7 Barcodes, we have a number of different options. Highlighted on the right are documents that we can now add a 2D barcode to. You can add it to the vial, the hard copy, the receipt, any counseling that's generated, your O pickup labels, any narcotic pickup, any authorization, any vacation supply labels if you're in Ontario, and any RX sync consent. So when going through this and setting it up, just remember and ask yourself the question, what piece of paper do I want to print and then eventually scan back so I don't have to file it? So there's just an example of what the 2D barcode will look like if it's activated on the hard copy. Your O pickup label. And they're being slow today. Now another option is to activate what we call the print script image barcode warning label. So as you can see on the screen, this barcode will print in the 5th position of your warning label set. What you're seeing right now is the thermal label, but this does work with the laser label set as well. It'll be in the same position, position number 5. And this is a unique barcode specific for that particular RX and can be used to scan in a document such as the original RX quite easily and have it saved against the RX record. So basically from a process perspective, you're going to process each item on the written prescription and generate a label set as per your current processes. Optionally, if you've got it activated, you can put a script image barcode label and affix it to the original order for every prescription listed. So the example that we have on the screen in front of you is a situation where there are 2 distinct prescription items on the original written. So in order to successfully scan this and to have it attached to both of those prescription records, you will need to place both of the barcode labels on the RX. You can, if you wish, if there are more, put more of those labels. So for example, if I have 4 written items on the prescription, I'm going to put 4 unique barcode labels on it. As normal, you're going to sign the hard copy and add any other information as you normally would. And you can set aside the hard copy and the original prescription with the script image barcode label for processing later. So when you're ready, either at the end of the day or more frequently, depending upon your volume, you can then scan these documents that you've set aside. So you'd place the stack of signed hard copies to first off in the feed tray of your document scanner. From the main menu on the start screen, select Utilities, Printed Document Scan/Import. You'll be prompted to start scanning, so just select the Start Scanning button. Once it's done, you'll be prompted if you wish to continue to scan. So at that point, you can repeat the process using the stack of your original written prescriptions that have the script image barcode labels affixed to them. Once you're done, you'll be prompted to process and reconcile. And at the top of the screen, you will have a list of all of the image that were successfully scanned and the barcode was successfully translated. So the system will then know which prescription record each of these items will be attached to. So as you notice, you've got a couple that are titled Original RX as well as hard copy. So the system does pull up enough information from those barcodes to determine what type of image is going to be saved against the prescription record. So once they're successfully scanned, if you want to just double check, you can go back into the prescription record in Modify Mode, click on the RX Images navigation button on the right-hand side. And as you'll notice in this particular example, there's a number 2 within the brackets. That indicates that there are 2 images attached to the prescription. And in this particular case, you have the script image, and you will notice the barcode label, very prominent. And again, just to repeat, this is what the system will use to attach the image to the prescription record. And the second tab is the hard copy. Once again, with my signature on it and some extra notes to indicate that I've signed off on it. Now, I can, if I wish, and the jurisdiction will allow, shred both of those 2 pieces of paper, and I no longer have to file them physically because they're filed within the system. Now, how do I store other documents? We have a number of reports within Kroll that have the capability of including a barcode to allow for easy scanning. What you have here are just 2 examples. On the left is the hard copy report, which some pharmacies used to sign off on their batch prescriptions. And the one on the right is the compliance checklist, which is part of the compliance report. The addition of the barcode is actually part of our next Service Pack update, so it's not yet available in Service Pack 16, but will be available in Service Pack 17. But once this is successfully scanned, the system is smart enough to save this particular image for every prescription that is noted on the form. So for example, in the hard copy report example, there are 11 line items. This image will be saved against all 11 prescription records. And the same would go for the compliance checklist as well. Our professional services documents, when in paper mode, also include a barcode for easy scanning. Now, one thing we need to remember in this particular example is that the scanning of the barcode not only saves the image against a specific record, but it may also trigger other functionality such as claim creation or the closing off of certain records. On your right-hand side, for those in Ontario, this is a sample of the Ontario Meds Check form. As you can see on the lower right-hand corner, you've got the barcode. And for those that use our immunization module, you have the printed form for immunization, and once again, you've got the barcode on the lower right-hand side. Once again, both of them, once successfully scanned in, will be linked to the appropriate patient and the appropriate med review or immunization record. So which document scanner should I be using? You have two examples on this slide. The one on the left is a brother. It looks like a bar. And on the right-hand side, you have a fairly high-end Fujitsu multiple document scanner. The brother and similar scanners on the left-hand side, we are not necessarily supported anymore by Kroll. However, we do have a number of customers that still use it, and it still works with Kroll, and it still will translate the barcodes and read the barcodes successfully. The difference between the two is that your brother and like scanners are a manual feed, and it will only feed one sheet at a time, and in some cases may not scan both sides, whereas your Fujitsu and similar scanners can hold a significant larger number of pieces of paper and can successfully scan them fairly quickly. Just to kind of put things into perspective, our hardware QA team in the past has placed a stack of 250 signed hard copies, which were successfully scanned within 15 to 20 seconds, and all were successfully translated and processed and linked to the appropriate prescription records fairly quickly. So now I'm just going to turn it over to Russell, who will walk us through the FaxRx Cloud application of Kroll, which further supports the concept of electronic documents.
Thank you very much, Scott. I'm going to talk a little bit about the FaxRx Cloud. It's an optional product that Kroll offers. If you were part of our webinar last year, it's going to be repeated for that just because, again, of the importance specifically that this has for electronic document storage. So I'm going to be talking about how to send a fax from a Kroll report and how to receive and process inbound faxes and how to manually fax a document. FaxRx Cloud basically is going to allow us to use the cloud as opposed to a physical fax machine to be able to send outbound and receive inbound faxes. So you no longer have this very large clunky device on your dispenser. And so in some cases, you may have still a fax modem-like device that will send these back and forth. So what do you do when we eliminate those, and how do you send and receive faxes? That's what I'll be talking about this evening. So I'm going to start off and just talking about how to send a fax from within the Kroll system. So once this option is enabled on your system, you really continue to process outbound documents like you normally would. So the most typical one that I'm just going to show you is just simply going into a patient record and pulling up the patient profile, tagging a couple of prescriptions, and then from the extra functions menu, selecting request renewal. So the renewal request form will appear, and on this form I can enter a reason for the renewal, and in this case it's going to this one physician, and I will be presented with a list of the different fax numbers and or offices that the physician works at. From that list I can select the specific office and fax number that I want to send this authorization to. So once I've selected that, I've indicated a reason at the bottom. I just simply click on the request button, and then that brings up the doctor authorization form report. If you're using this before, currently, as you have for all of your reports, you have a print button, and as well you can override the printer or the tray and indicate the number of copies that you want. But once FaxRx Cloud is enabled, for all of these types of reports that are typically faxed, you'll also be given an option in the left-hand side where you can select between sending to a printer or to a fax machine. If you select the fax option, optionally, you can also request a fax confirmation form, and the print button changes to a fax button. So once you've entered everything in on the form and selected the fax option, I just hit enter or click on the fax button, and then that report ultimately is going to get queued up. So I'm just going to close off this report now, and then back at the start screen, just like it does today, it's actually now created a couple of my callbacks. I've had 2 prescriptions in there, but what you'll see is on the far right-hand side, now each of the callbacks is automatically being time-stamped and indicated that it's been faxed at that particular time. Now, over in the other outbound fax queue is a list of all outstanding forms or reports that are in the middle of being processed. Now, in this case, this is containing my prescription authorization request, and it's automatically included the fax number that it's going to be sent to, including it on the report as well. So I didn't actually have to type that fax number in, nor do I have to run this piece of paper over to a machine and then rekey in the fax and potentially getting the number wrong as I tried to send the fax out. This is all being automated based on my earlier selection of the doctor, his office, and which of his fax machines I want to send this to. So this is in the queue, and approximately every 30 seconds, the queue is checked to see if there's any outstanding documents that need to be sent. Once the queue picks it up, it sends it out to the cloud and completely clears out my queue in this case. And that's all that there is to actually sending an outbound fax document. So, having said that, what about receiving and processing any inbound documents? Again, you're used to running over to a fax machine and grabbing the piece of paper off the document. You can probably hear the machine squealing away as it's printing out the piece of paper. Well, back on the start screen here, we have this tile called an inbound document tile. And whenever there's an inbound document waiting to be processed, a little number will appear in the top there to indicate that there's something in the queue that you need to address. So if I just go into the inbound documents queue, what you'll end up having is on the left-hand side, you'll have all of the inbound documents that have yet to be processed. And on the right-hand side, you'll have sort of a thumbnail image of the currently selected inbound document. Now, one of the great things about going to FaxRx Cloud is the whole idea is to completely reduce or if not eliminate all the paper that you would normally generate by a fax. And that includes, in this example, junk faxes that you might be receiving as well. Instead of wasting paper and then having to just throw it out, I can select this particular document, and this is just a junk fax. I can just simply hit the delete button on here. It'll confirm if I want to delete the document, and that document is now gone. Now, in this case, I'm now showing my prescription authorization request. So I sent that out to the physician. He's reviewed it. He signed it, potentially made some changes, and faxed it back to me, and it's now sitting in my inbound document area. So in this case, I want to actually start processing this prescription. So I've got the item selected, and I'm going to now hit F to call up the document. This brings up the document into this processing screen so I can decide what it is exactly that I want to do with this document. I'm given a list of selections. Possibly by the time I brought it on this screen, I might decide now, oh, I don't want that. I want to just delete this document. I can turn around and forward this fax as a mail message to my internal mail system. I can save this fax or document against the patient record, save it as a patient document. I can turn around and fax this back out to another number if I want to, or in this case, I can use it to process prescriptions. Now, as Scott had alluded to earlier, a lot of our documents that we print now, we're also printing a 2D barcode on the lower corner of the document. That's anything especially that we expect likely you're going to be scanning back into our system. We're going to put that on there to help the system process this document with as little much user intervention as possible. So embedded in that barcode in this case will be what type of a report this is, and also information in this case containing what prescriptions are actually on there. So that's being translated automatically by the system on the top screen here, knowing it already knows what type of a report it is. It's got a timestamp of when that report was actually originally generated, and in this case, it knows the patient that it belongs to. So by default, it knows I'm about to actually use this document to process prescriptions against it. So in this case, at the bottom, I'm just going to select the Process button, and that will automatically take me to our drop-off screen. So if you've used this drop-off screen before, it's the same idea, is that will automatically pull in the document, and you're going to see the document on the left-hand side and the rest of the prescription information on the right. Now, in this case, because it knows it's a prescription authorization request, and it actually knows that there's 2 prescriptions embedded in that barcode, what it's going to do here is it's going to automatically invoke a copy from the original prescription, and in this case, it knows there's 2 prescriptions on there. So all of that information from the original script is brought over to this area, so you can make any changes if necessary, if the physician has made any changes themselves. And at the bottom of the screen, you have the ability to OK or refuse this particular prescription. So I'm just going to say the physician okayed it, and now it's gone on to the second prescription. Again, invoke the copy function. I can make any changes if necessary, and I'm just going to go okay that one as well. So I've now got 2 prescriptions, new orders in this case, created and put together in this work order. And on the bottom of the screen, I can either fill this at a later time, just putting it into one of my processing queues, or I can fill it now. And if I select fill now in this case, or later if I'm pulling it up, basically it comes up onto the initial screen, and that image again is on the left-hand side. I can finish off any further data entry on the right-hand side, and then click on the Save button, and then it'll bring me up to the fill screen like it normally would as you're processing any prescriptions. And then back on the main Start screen, my inbound documents queue is now automatically cleared out. And in this example, my callbacks is also now completely cleared out because it's now automatically processed all that documentation. So I've now shown you how to process an inbound document, but what if you've actually got a piece of paper, unfortunately, that you need to then scan and send out in a fax, or you've got a document on your system that, again, you want to scan or you want to send out via fax. So on the Outbound Fax tab, we've got a new fax button in this case. So instead of running this over to the non-existent fax machine, I will now select the new fax button on here, and it brings up this new fax message screen. And the first thing that shows up is a to function. So in to, if I want, I can just start typing the fax number that I want to send it to, or I can start typing part of a name. And in this case, the system's automatically going to search all the physicians, patients, and stores that have the matching name and or partial fax number that you're typing in. So I can select from that list of fax numbers, and I'm just going to select the top one, the Dr. Smith on this one. And in this case now, I want to attach a document. So I have a choice here. I can actually now attach a document via the scanner. So if I've got a piece of paper, I can actually then put this in my document scanner and scan it in now. I also have the ability to select from my fax or network scan. So if there was an inbound document in there that had been sent to me, I can actually select that option. It'll list me the current outstanding inbound documents that I can select from, and then I can send that along. Or, as I noted, I can also select from another file. So if I've got a document file already on my computer, I can actually just select that particular document. So that's what I'm going to choose here, is I'm just going to do from another file. So I've got a Word document on here that I've just imported or browsed on my computer and located. And then on the bottom corner of the screen here, I'm going to click the Send button. And then that goes into my outbound fax queue that we saw. Every 30 seconds, the system's checking to see if there's anything in there. And once it finds it, picks it up and sends that fax out. And at that point, my queue is now cleared. So that's basically how we run through all of the different processes of sending out a fax from within Kroll, how to receive any inbound faxes, and then how do I actually send a piece of paper or a document out to someone in all cases where I don't have a physical fax machine to work off of anymore. So as you can see, this is all sort of centered on the whole concept of electronic document and electronic document storage. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go hand this back over to Scott. He's going to talk about the Offsite Rx backup function that we have available and the importance of that when you are in an electronic document world. So, Scott.
Thank you, Russell. So, Offsite Rx is a product that the TELUS team does offer for Kroll, and it definitely plays a role in your paperless or your electronic document storage strategy. All jurisdictions do require the pharmacy systems to be backed up on a regular basis. It ensures that your data is available in the event of a catastrophic event that does result in loss of data. So currently, there are a number of different approaches that exist. Now, this is not a comprehensive list, but just as an example of what is out there. You have the good old backup tapes. The intention is the tape is left in the unit overnight. The system backs it up, and the tape is then removed and taken off-site for a period of time and then replaced with a fresh tape. There's the ability to transfer the backup files onto a thumb drive or a USB drive that's encrypted. Or something even more basic, as one workstation acts as the backup server to the other workstations within your pharmacy. But if we utilize any one of these three or some others, what would happen if your backups are not removed from the pharmacy and they're destroyed in the catastrophic event? I think everyone on the call can probably recall horror stories of water pipe breaks in server rooms that not only destroy the server and the data, but also the backup tapes because those tapes were never taken off site. What happens if the backups are actually taken off site but they're lost? So not only do we have a data issue, but we also have a patient confidentiality issue. And finally, what would happen if all your hardware is destroyed in that catastrophic event? Now, in the olden days, if a few days' worth of backups were lost, you would just use the Kroll reentry mode and use the filed hard copies as your reference. So you use those hard copies to rekey the prescription information in an order. But if those hard copies are now shredded or not even printed, what do we? So this is where Offsite Rx will play an integral role. If the TELUS product, as mentioned before, for your Kroll system, your data for your pharmacy is actually housed in an offsite data warehouse that does reside within Canada. It's definitely an efficient and effective solution for your backup and recovery needs. Your pharmacy data can be backed up multiple times per day and can actually be configured to generate a file and fire up that file to the backup server every 2 hours if you wish. Transmission of your backup data to the data warehouse is very secure. The application is monitored 24/7, and in the event of an issue, TELUS team members can react quickly to rectify the problem. You can manage your recovery processes very quickly in the event that you do have an issue, as long as you have a compatible piece of hardware and connection to an internet, you can have your pharmacy data restored within a few hours. And it does use 256-bit encryption while the data is in the service. Excuse me. Now, jurisdictions have defined rules around offsite data storage, and the Kroll Offsite Rx product is fully compliant with each and every one of these rules. So whenever a pharmacy approaches us to implement some form of electronic document storage strategy, we always strongly recommend that the Offsite Rx tool be utilized as your backup process. It will ensure that your data is recovered in the event of such a catastrophic event. And we need to also remember too, and this is why the Offsite Rx works with the electronic document strategy, is that with no more filing of paper, how would you recover your data without a sound backup process? And I'll turn it back over to Russell.
Thank you, Scott. Scott had mentioned earlier, as he was talking about electronic document storage, that there really are two types of models to it. There is a print and scan, which is the one that we've shown tonight, where you actually do print out some of your documentation, take pen to paper to it, and then scan it back in and shred. But there's a second feature available, a second model available as well, where we can actually use electronic signature capture pads to capture your signature electronically where you're not actually printing out any documentation whatsoever. So everything is done using Kroll workflow processes and using the digital signature capture that we even eliminate that additional paper, and there's therefore no more scanning back in and shredding after the fact. So we are actually going to have a completely separate webinar in 4 weeks from tonight on May 29th that will talk just about that second feature. As Scott noted, today, if you have an electronic document scanner already, with a couple simple configurations, you can actually already start using the print and scan method tomorrow morning if you want. It's already available to you. With the digital signature capture, there's a little bit more involved with that. Besides needing the signature capture pad, you'll also need some additional workflows configured at that point, but you can go entirely electronic at that point during the process. So if you are interested, we are having the second webinar 4 weeks from tonight, and the invites will be coming out shortly if they haven't already. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be presenting at that time. So once again, everybody, and to my co-presenter and Aaron and Frederick as well, thank everyone this evening for participating, and wish you have a good evening.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the Gain Efficiencies with Electronic Document Storage and Digital Faxing webinar. Thank you for your participation, and have a nice day.